Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
A different reality. The beginning of something new. Naruto ran through the bustling streets of Konoha, his heart pounding in his chest, and his breathing quickened by exhaustion. He was very late. The young blonde dodged the moving figures as he made his way to the academy. It was his first day, and he didn't want to make a bad impression. I was already 6 years old. I've been living in his apartment since I was 5. Sandaime moved him, they're saying that something had happened at the orphanage, and that they could no longer take care of him. At first, Naruto was excited to be able to live alone. Sandaime took care of the rent, and even gave him a payment. He was about 3 blocks from the doors of the academy when he collided with a huge figure. Naruto screamed and fell on his back, slowly looking up at the man's face. The stranger's face was contracted with anger, and he was about 6 feet tall. His face was rough, and his hair, short and black. As soon as Naruto looked into his eyes, he knew what was waiting for him. He always did. Well, I can't believe what I'm seeing. The person I want to see has come to see me. The man laughed, lifting Naruto up by the collar of his black t-shirt. Naruto struggled, trying to free himself, but he was failing miserably. 2 other men were standing next to the one who was holding him firmly by the shirt. They both smiled smugly at the situation of the little blonde. So what do we do to the devil? The one to the right of the black-haired man asked. Well, we should take him for a walk around the bend. It's the least we can do to reward him. The one on the man's left spoke, pointing with his finger towards the alley. Naruto's eyes started to tear up, soaking his black t-shirt. Please don't hurt me, the 6-year-old shouted. The man holding him scoffed, turning to the left. You know what? I think we should take him for a walk. His 2 friends smiled mockingly at the decision. Pain. That word summed up his whole life. The blows continued against his small body. His mind was screaming to run away, but the other 2 men were holding his arms against the wall. Blood soaked his shirt, and he had bruises on his arms, legs, but mostly on his abdomen. The man smiled contentedly as he contemplated his work. The 2 men who were holding him against the wall let go of his wrists when the man who was hitting him finished. Naruto's arms fell to his sides as his knees buckled, and he fell to the ground in pain. Even when he shouted for help, few noticed, and those who did simply stared at him as they walked away. Demon, why ask for help if no one will come to rescue you? Who would care about such a monster? Naruto watched as the man bent down to look directly into his eyes, which were now shedding tears. I bet no one would care if you dropped dead right now. People would celebrate your death, and I would happily dance on your grave. Naruto cried as he watched the men leave him broken. Naruto kept crying as he saw someone walking down the alley. Hey, please help me, she sobbed. The man stopped to look at him, and then went on his way. Why is that? The blonde screamed. He never asked for this. What had he done to deserve it? He grimaced as he got to his feet again, and staggered to the wall for support. Uzumaki Naruto. The teacher called without getting an answer. She had brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. He was wearing a Chunin vest, and an idolate on his forehead. He also had a distinctive scar in the middle of his face and nose. Looking at the attendance list, he began to wonder if the boy would not be informed about his first day at the academy. He continued with the attendance list, and when he was almost at the end, he heard a knock at the door. The class started chatting when he stopped announcing the names. He went to the door and opened it, but saw no one. He was about to leave when he collided with something. She looked down and saw a blond young man in a bright orange jumpsuit. His blonde hair was messy and scruffy, giving him the look of a homeless man. He was leaning against the wall while staring at his teacher. Are you Naruto? The professor asked him. The 6-year-old nodded and smiled. You're late, but I'll let it go, since it's your first day. The professor walked over to his desk and motioned for Naruto to come over. Naruto saw this and stiffened up, wondering how he was supposed to walk there without help and without showing that he was injured. He had already hidden his bloody shirt and bruised arms, putting on the orange jumpsuit over it. Slowly, he released his hand from the door frame, desperately trying to keep his balance unaided. He walked with a firm step towards the teacher, trying to keep his back straight and move his legs naturally. He got halfway there before he fell. He landed in a comical way, provoking laughter from the class. Naruto slowly got to his feet and laughed out loud. Seeing her reaction, the class stopped. Naruto stopped laughing and smiled broadly. He raised his right arm and pointed towards the center of the class. "Laugh while you can, because I'm going to beat every single one of you. Naruto, if you're done introducing yourself, there's an empty seat in the back," Iruka said, rolling his eyes at Naruto's outburst. Naruto looked back at the top of the stairs. The blonde man grimaced as he walked up the steps. Each one seemed to double his pain. Although he had stopped bleeding almost immediately after the incident, he still felt weak. Finally, he came upstairs and sat next to a girl with lavender eyes without pupils and short hair. Naruto sat nervously next to him. After a few seconds, he decided to break the ice. "Hi, I'm Naruto. What's your name?" he said, thinking maybe this was his chance to make a friend. Hinata, he stammered and lowered his gaze to the ground. "Hello, Hinata-chan." He paused. "I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to start a friendly relationship." Then he noticed that she was not looking into his eyes. "Are you afraid of me? Does he hate me already?" The question troubled him greatly. While Naruto started thinking, Hinata had her own thoughts. Did Hinata-chan just call me? Hinata thought, keeping her eyes on the ground. Naruto began to feel uncomfortable because of the silence that had reigned in the conversation. "Hey," Hinata gave a little snort when she started talking. "Did you hate me?" Hinata looked at him in disbelief. "Why did you say that?" Hinata asked, surprised that he would ask such a question. "Well, you don't look me in the eye, so I thought maybe you're afraid of me," the blonde said, with his gaze fixed on his desk. I didn't hate you, Naruto-kun, I just..." "Naruto? Hinata? Do you even know what I've been talking about?" Iruka asked, with his arms crossed and his gaze fixed on them. Hinata squirmed at the furious look, feeling very embarrassed for the sudden attention. Naruto smiled and rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I'm not Iruka-sensei. I didn't even know you were talking." Iruka gasped as the class erupted in laughter. Only one thought crossed his mind. "Oh God. This kid is holding a neon sign that says trouble everywhere." After the class was over, Naruto asked the question that had been bothering him since he sat down next to him. "Will you be my friend?" Naruto asked. And Mata was paralyzed. He started fiddling with his fingers nervously. "I would be happy for Naruto-kun." And Nata watched as Naruto stiffened. "Really?" Naruto asked, with growing hopes. She nodded shyly, and Nata let out a squeal of surprise when Naruto gave her a sincere smile that seemed to melt her heart. A slight blush adorned her facial features. "I'll be the best friend you ever had. I promise," he screamed. The two of them left the classroom, each on his own. Hinata approached her father, Yuga Asi. Asi's cold, calculating gaze settled on Hinata. His body was stern, and his posture showed a total confidence in his abilities. The two of them headed to Yuga Mansion. "Hinata, how did it go on your first day? What did you learn?" Asi watched as her face blushed slightly. "I made a friend. Why? I learned about the great shinobi nations," Hinata said in a whisper. Asi arched an eyebrow at the comment about his new friend, but downplayed it. "Hinata, when we get home, we have chakra control exercises for you to practice," he said in his usual cold, monotonous voice. Hinata nodded cautiously as they returned home. Naruto went in the opposite direction to Hinata. He walked through the streets, ignoring the cold stares that followed him. Those cold looks wouldn't dampen his spirits today. Not after he made his first friend. He walked towards his apartment with an indescribable smile. He walked towards the wrecked apartment complex. It looked as if a bomb had exploded. It wasn't the nicest home for a 6-year-old, at the very least. He walked to his room and opened the door with the keys. Ignoring the threats spray-painted all over the door, he opened it. He went into his room and turned on the lights. Cleaned up, had ramen for dinner, and read some books. He didn't normally read the boring informational books, but he wanted to impress his new friend. When she started yawning, she got up and went to bed. Some metal springs of the mattress came out, which made him quite uncomfortable. He went round and round for an hour before falling asleep. Last week couldn't have been better. He was still being beaten, yes, but now he had a friend. At the academy, he studied a lot and became an average student. On the days when he was beaten, he would make some joke to cheer himself up. One of the jokes affected the whole class. Before the class, Naruto brought 10 bottles of instant glue to the classroom. She glued everything together with instant glue. Chairs, books, papers, tables, pencils, pens, chalk, belongings, and anything else that was in the room was taped. When the class and the Iruka came in, they were stunned that they couldn't sit down or move anything. Poor Naruto couldn't keep his face would be and ended up scraping the glue off. He and Jimata were always doing projects and team activities. Naruto got to know her throughout the week while they were talking to her. Since then, I have always looked forward to school. Until that unfortunate day, however, Naruto and Jimata walked out of class together after Iruka fired them. Hinata's father only picked her up on the first day at the academy. Otherwise, I would send a branch member to pick it up. However, that day was the same, Hinata. The girl jumped at the sound of her name and looked away from Naruto to look at her father, Ace. H.I. he stammered, looking at his father. Ace's gaze fell on the tuft of blonde hair next to her. "Is this the friend you told me about?" Ace said, without taking her eyes off Naruto. Naruto saw her look and noticed that she was as cold as ice, like that of many others. "H.I. father. You mustn't talk to this one anymore, disgrace," he said coldly. And Nata begged her father, but he wouldn't listen to anything. He had made up his mind, and he would be too stubborn to listen to anything else. After Ace's order, he was always seated away from her in class, because that was ordered by the Yuga's main leader. When he tried to sit next to her or even get closer, Iruka would stop and shake his head. Naruto was shocked at not being able to get close to her, after having made a friend. After that, his jokes got worse. His depression increased, and he found himself smiling more and more falsely. His grades dropped instantly, and he was now the last in his class. Nothing could make his life worse. Oh, I thought so. A different reality. Dreams. It had been a week since Naruto had last spoken to his friend, Hinata. It was during the class that Naruto noticed that Iruka was busy talking to a chunin. While he was busy, Naruto took the opportunity to talk to his friend. He approached her stealthily. So stealthily, in fact, that he accidentally frightened her. She gave a cry of surprise when she saw the tuft of blonde hair hidden under the desk. He put a finger to his lips to indicate that he should keep quiet so as not to attract attention. She approached cautiously to show that she understood his gesture of silence, and Mata began to speak in a lower voice than usual. "And Naruto-kun, I am so sorry that my father..." She began to cry softly. "I'm so sorry, and Naruto-kun, that we can't speak in Greek." And Nata stopped, slightly surprised, when she felt a finger on her lips. Irritating Naruto, another one of his sincere smiles. "Don't cry, and Mata-chan, it wasn't your fault. Please don't cry, it makes me sad to see you cry." It was at that moment that Iruka finished talking to the chunin. He quickly left through the door on his right. Iruka turned to look at the class when he noticed that the orange that was so familiar to him was missing. And Nata quickly whispered to Naruto that Iruka-sensei would see them when he saw a chunin coming out. Naruto crawled under the desks, trying to reach his across the room. Some students kicked him, while others frowned in disgust. He was halfway there when someone stopped him. He looked up and saw a familiar face. "Naruto, what are you up to? Won't this be another one of your jokes?" He was accused by Iruka, seeing that he had been crawling under the desks. Naruto shook his head, left and right, vigorously. Iruka glared at him, unsure about whether or not to trust the prankster. I sighed deeply before I spoke. "Well, it doesn't matter anymore now that the class is over." Iruka walked to the front of the class, while Naruto stood up. Class is over. She was quite happy today, as she had had the opportunity to talk to her friend. He walked through the streets with a happy smile on his face, ignoring the icy stares that were directed at him. She didn't hate him either. The thought filled him with ecstasy as he ran towards his apartment. He was almost home when he suddenly ran out of air and was thrown against a nearby wall. His back hit the wall full on, and he stretched out his arms. Then he collapsed against the wall, moaning in pain. He opened his eyes and saw a pair of legs firmly hugged in front of him. He looked up and saw a white porcelain mask. He knew clearly that this time he was in trouble, recognizing that he was an Ambu. Demon, I can no longer ignore your existence between us. So now, I will take the responsibility to put an end to your growing evil. Those who witnessed the scene began to cheer at the ninja's proclamation. Naruto noticed it, and his gaze suddenly became expressionless. Does everyone want to see me dead? Why is that? I don't get it. What have I done to make them hate me so much? Maybe I should die. They would be happy, wouldn't they? The Ambo launched a quick and swift kick to the blonde's head. The impact was instantaneous. Naruto was thrown almost a meter by the powerful force. The world turned black as soon as he felt the impact. He skidded another meter before coming to an abrupt stop. The Ambo approached him with a murderous smile plastered on his face behind the mask. He stopped in front of the Q container. Unsheathing the ninjakin from his back, he placed it face down. He aimed at the blonde man's heart. Now die, Alfaraz. The sword came down, ready to take the young man's life. When he was 5 centimeters from reaching his target, the sword and its wielder were thrown at the opposite wall. With a much greater force than the man's previous kick, the Ambo looked up to see who would dare to interfere in his revenge against the demon. He would be surprised to see one of the legendary Sannin with a frown that would scare anyone. His arms were firmly crossed, and his eyes were narrowed with anger. Hirai Yasama, why did you defend him? Don't you know who that boy is? He blurted out the Ambo, pointing to the unconscious boy who was nearby. Jiraiya almost burst out in fury. I couldn't believe people were so blind. Now it was Jiraiya's turn to get angry. I know perfectly well who that boy is. I can tell by his whisker-scarred cheeks. That boy is your savior. Your hero. And that's how you treat him. He snapped. Then he turned to everyone who was witnessing the scene. This is for all of you. I couldn't trust the Yond to completely seal the hell out of me. What they have been treating so badly was an innocent 6-year-old boy. Jiraiya approached the boy and carried him on his shoulder, holding him by the collar of the clothes. The crowd that had gathered began to whisper and turned away to make way for the furious Zenin. The Zambu followed him nervously when Jiraiya glared at him, knowing perfectly well what his next punishment would be. The watermelon moaned to me when he saw that another stack of papers was placed on top of the desk. He always dreamed that they would disappear in a cloud of smoke or that they would be sent to hell. I had done enough for today, right? I sighed, before pulling out his pipe and leaning back in the chair. He thought his job was over after the day John accepted me the position. And now there he was, signing papers once more. Damn, I had to find a successor and fast. That's when the white-haired Zenin decided to show up. Satobi looked towards the windowsill and saw Jiraiya accompanied by a blonde boy. The blonde hung limply from the Zenin's arm. The white-haired Zenin came in and set him down carefully. Then he approached Sarutobi, who was still staring at him. He clasped his fingers together, as if deep in thought. Would you mind explaining to me? Jiraiya asked, a hint of anger perceptible in his voice. Sarutovia looked away from the boy to refocus her gaze on her former student. Before starting, he made a series of manual stamps. In this way, the room was soundproofed, preventing the outside from listening to the conversation. Well, first of all, do you know who the guy is? Sarutobi asked, knowing that he should play his cards right. Hirai already approached in response. I know perfectly well that the boy is the recipient of the QB. Sarutobi shook his head slowly. The action disturbed Jiraiya's thoughts. What do you mean, no? I mean, do you know the boy's family history? In other words, who is he? Sarutobi's face remained serene throughout the conversation. He was calming down the start of the discussion quite easily. He's an orphan, that's all I know. Why do you ask? Jiraiya asked, wondering where Saratev and the conversation was leading. The watermelon pondered to me how I should break the news. I just knew I might be on the wrong side of the situation. I sighed deeply before I spoke. Jiraiya, don't you recognize the similarities? Jiraiya arched an eyebrow and turned to look at the boy. That's when it hit him like a lightning bolt. His eyes opened wide, of an inhuman size. You're not saying that he... Cool, that's what I'm saying. The only word Jiraiya could utter was, how? The watermelon relaxed in his chair and took another drag on his pipe, exhaling the smoke. Do you remember that Arashi's wife Kumiko was pregnant just before the battle against the Kirubi? Well, yes, but she died before she could give birth, Jiraiya said, with solemnity, leaving behind his previous surprise. I'm afraid you're mistaken, Sarutobi said. Jiraiya looked up startled. See, that's what was said, but the truth is that Naruto was born the same day his father sacrificed himself for the village. Kumiko went into labor when the Kyuubi attacked, due to the sudden stress she suffered. Naruto was born, and Kumiko died later. Harashi had to use it to seal the Kyuubi. Did he seal it in his own son? Jiraiya asked, surprised by the sudden turn of events. Yes, I'm afraid so. It was not an easy decision for him, believe me. Although he had much more faith in the village, he hoped that his son would be treated as a hero, not as a threat. Jiraiya continued trying to digest the new information. It all seemed too much to take in. As the information slowly took in, he narrowed his eyes in anger. Why wasn't I informed? Sarutobi saw it coming, but he never found the perfect answer. Jiraiya, I couldn't tell you because. Don't give me that nonsense. Snarled the Sennin, his fists clenched at his sides. He took the child to me. He approached the 6-year-old boy, carried him in his arms, and put him on his back. Oh, before I forget. Hirai has already disappeared through the window with the child. He returned with a member of Ambu. The Ambu had his head down, embarrassed. This is an Ambu who tried to kill Naruto. Naruto would have died if I hadn't walked by. The Ambu shuddered as he felt a murderous look and a murderous instinct coming from the Okage. He was beginning to regret that he had tried to kill the boy. Not because he felt sorry for her, but because of the consequences it would bring. I'll let you take care of this criminal. Jiraiya turned to leave with the blonde boy in tow. He jumped over the windowsill and landed gracefully on the pavement. The watermelon gave me a sneaky smile when he saw Jiraiya leave. That was better than I thought. Naruto needed to leave the village. It would make the boy's life a lot easier. Hirai was already so predictable. He himself needed someone to help him take care of Naruto. The current situation made it easier for him, but it also made him the villain. The Sennin walked towards the gates of Kanawagakure, coming out with his student's son. As he was walking, he heard a man shouting something that made him hate the village even more than he already felt. Jiraiya-sama, are you going to take down the demon? Jiraiya stopped in his tracks. Those who heard him shout saw Jiraiya with the demon in tow and started cheering. The devil will finally find his end. Death to the devil. We will finally sleep in peace tonight. Hearing the cheers, Jiraiya became furious, to say the least. He would have been angry before, but now that he knew he was the son of his former student, he was furious. No, I'm taking him to protect him from people like you. The Zenin growled softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The crowd stopped cheering when they saw Jiraiya leaving Konoha with the blonde guy. He reached the gates and didn't bother to stop. He showed his passport to the Chunin on duty and walked away. He didn't care about the new perspective the village had on him. I was going to train this young man to stand up for himself. Naruto's eyes suddenly opened, revealing a blinding light. They were immediately closed, and he covered them with his hand to protect himself from the light. As soon as his eyes got used to it, he looked around. Suddenly, memories flooded his mind, and he shuddered. He was dead. He looked around and saw a fire. That meant someone was there. The only question is who. He sat up to better observe his surroundings. A white-haired man was approaching with a fish in his hand. The man noticed that the blonde had woken up and continued to calmly approach. I see you've woken up, the man said, sitting down by the fire and starting to prepare the fish to be cooked in the heat of the flames. Naruto kept staring at him blankly. He thought about the last events he remembered and could not recognize the stranger. What happened? Asked the blonde. He remembered the Zambu proclaiming his death, the crowd cheering, a kick to the head, and then, blank. I couldn't remember anything else no matter how hard I tried. Well, let's see. Jiraiya started thinking about how to express it in simple words that a 6-year-old could understand. I found an ambo trying to kill you while I was passing by and I decided to help you. Then I took him to the prison to receive his punishment. While I was with Watermelon, I decided to take you with me to train. Naruto looked at him with perplexity visible on his face. Why is that? Naruto asked. So you can defend yourself. Naruto shook his head, which made Jiraiya arch an eyebrow at the peculiar behavior. No, I mean, why help me? Jiraiya looked at the boy with surprise and then remembered what the villagers had done before they left. The boy must have had a harder life than he thought. What was Sarutobi thinking about? He looked back at the boy who was still waiting for his answer. What? Can't I stop a little boy from being killed? No, it's just that Naruto started squirming, uncomfortable, and his eyes filled with contained tears. I thought everyone wanted me to die. Hirai already took his gaze away from Naruto and fixed it on the flickering flames of the fire. Listen, kid, you have to be strong to survive in this corrupt world. There is simply no place for the weak. Remember, there are no shortcuts in life. Wishes and dreams come true only with your own hands. We all need a dream or a goal to strive for, so now I ask, what is your dream? Naruto looked at his small hands and then closed his eyes to think. A dream. What is my dream? Jiraiya waited for his answer without taking his eyes off the little one. Suddenly, the blonde man smiled, showing that he had made a decision. I'm going to be the Hokage. Naruto's eyes opened and revealed a new cerulean blue. Unlike his previous eyes, depressed, lonely and aching, these shone with fierce determination. Jiraiya saw the eyes and thought he saw ghosts. Those eyes were just like his students. The same will and determination shone in the blue tones. This made Jiraiya smile. What is your reason for wanting to be Hokage? So that everyone will start treating me with respect and treat me as someone, not as a nobody. Naruto smiled at the end of his short speech. Jiraiya smiled and nodded in acceptance. It's not a great answer, but it's a good one to start with. He will learn more with life. I have high expectations for this guy. Hirai has already spoken again. All right, let's get to work. I assure you that my training methods are not at all easy. It will be hard, but I know you will make it in the end. If you are ready to fight for your dream, you will pursue it to the end. Naruto kept looking at the man. Naruto, are you ready to get started? Jiraiya asked. Naruto replied with an affirmative nod. Well, we'll start your training tomorrow. For now, to eat. Jiraiya grabbed the fish that was roasting by the fire. He handed one to Naruto. Thanks, Jiraiya listened to Naruto and almost gave himself a sketch. Forgive me, I'm Jiraiya, also known as the legendary Toad Sennin. Jiraiya said, screaming as he approached the end. What is a Sennin? Naruto asked innocently. Jiraiya's mouth filled with sweat, but she quickly regained her composure. It doesn't matter, just eat. While they were eating, Jiraiya was assailed by a thought that had not occurred to her. Oh my god. Now that I have a student, my time for research has been reduced. Jiraiya burst into tears like an anim. Naruto did not notice Jiraiya's actions, but was having his own thoughts. A new beginning. A different reality. The return of unpleasant memories. And Nata walked towards the academy escorted by a member of the branch. He followed the woman in silence as they passed several blocks. They were about a block away when a blonde and a pink-haired girl appeared. They talked to each other and laughed. A boy with jet black hair passed by them on the way to the academy, and the girls immediately saw him and laughed. When Hinata entered the academy, she sat at the back as always. He looked around for his blonde friend, but did not see him. He waited and watched as the students came in. None of them were Naruto. He continued to watch the door, waiting for the boy with the mustaches to come in. When the class started, he got a little worried. He wondered if maybe he would be late because he was making a joke. She told herself that throughout the class. At the end of the class, he hesitantly approached Iruka. Iruka-sensei, she whispered. He turned to look at the shy girl, with a gentle smile on his face. Do you know where he is in Naruto-kun? Iruka looked at her, and his smile faded. And Nata, I'm sorry to inform you like this, but Iruka showed compassion for the girl. She knew that since Naruto was her only friend, this news would probably hurt her quite a bit. I sighed. I also missed the blonde's antics. Naruto has left the village temporarily due to some circumstances. The news touched Hinata instantly. Her shoulders sagged and her eyes trembled in a silence of surprise. Then he remembered for a moment what he had said. When will he be back? He stammered, looking at Iruka hopefully. I'm afraid I have no idea myself. He looked at the girl, whose sadness was clearly reflected on her face. He spoke again to encourage her. Don't worry, he'll be back someday. We just have to be strong and wait patiently, okay? And Nata ascended and left the academy with a gloomy air. The branch member who would accompany her home was about to ask her why she had stayed after class, but noticing the little girl's sadness, he decided to leave her alone. They walked home in depressing silence, while Hinata thought hurriedly about what had happened that day. He wondered many things, such as why he had left, where he had gone and, above all, when he would return. Big time jump. 5 years later. However, I am glad to see that he is back with us. The watermelon me gave a friendly smile to the guy in front of his desk. Her blonde hair was unruly and spiky, and her cerulean eyes reflected warmth, but also experience in life's difficulties. He was wearing a crimson trench coat over a black tank top. His trousers were black, with numerous pockets for storing scrolls and equipment. A crib cover, and it was firmly attached to her right leg. She was also wearing custom, black shinobi sandals. However, I would like to know where Jiraiya is right now, Watermelon asked the 11-year-old, who only sighed before answering. Guess what? Erosanin is not so difficult to decipher. Watermelon gave a deep sigh, knowing that the guy was trying to insinuate. Bathroom house. Naruto stated affirmatively, on target. The Hokage turned over some papers on his desk. Then I guess you want to be tested to determine your rank and status as a blade shinobi, Sarutobi asked, not taking his eyes off the papers piled up on his desk. Naruto sound. I guess you won't miss anything, huh? Watermelon laughed slightly at me. I guess not. Naruto already knew almost all the rules and laws of Konoha. If I wanted to be Hokage, I had to be right. He knew that the Hokage could evaluate a person according to his criteria to determine his rank. This procedure used to be carried out when the person joined the village. It could also be carried out when the Hokage considered it necessary. The watermelon gave me a puff on his pipe before continuing. Well, I'll arrange the exam. I'll have it ready for tomorrow. Until then, why don't you take a look? You've been out 4 or 5 years. Naruto laughed sadly. I may want to see the village, but the village may not want to see me. Naruto, I know it will be difficult, but I know that you will succeed in the end. Unlike others, you will have to work much harder to earn the respect of the villages. I know very well, but thank you anyway. Naruto left the office through the door, leaving the watermelon with his thoughts. Naruto had just left the Hokage tower, passing the 2 guards on the way. He knew that he could no longer be defeated, but the hateful looks still made him nervous. At least now I knew why they were doing it. It was during his training that he was informed of the devastating secret. Flashback, 4 years ago, the force of the Senin's attack pushed Naruto back. The training match between the two was a real taijutsu match. They continued to exchange blows. Unfortunately, Naruto continued to take the brunt of the attacks. He received a blow to the forehead, which threw him backwards, where he hit his head against a tree. The force of both attacks left him stunned. Hirai already took advantage of the moment and dealt Naruto a punch to the stomach. That's when he lost consciousness, with blurred vision, until the world turned black. Naruto's vision began to clear up as he observed his surroundings. He was no longer in the forest, but in a kind of sewer. Pipes covered the walls and ceiling, and water filled the passages up to the ankles. An unpleasant smell hung over the passages. If I had to describe it, I'd say it smelled like death and decay. As I was observing the area, a faint red glow illuminated part of the passageway. The glow seemed menacing and malevolent. The direction of Red Laura was the only clue he had to get out of there, so he cautiously walked towards her. She followed him, and as he got closer to the fountain, she heard a faint growl. He continued towards her, the growl increasing in volume, until he reached a cage with a piece of paper attached to it. He looked at the paper more carefully, only to realize it said stamp. His gaze wandered from the seal to the cage, where he perceived an eerie presence. The total darkness inside the cage was suddenly illuminated with large red and demonic eyes. Well, look who finally decided to pay a visit. A demonic voice mocked from behind the bars of the cage. Naruto made a jump of surprise, and his eyes opened wide, of an inhuman size. What's the matter, brat? Are you afraid of my amazing power? Why should you? Because I am the great Kubino Kitsune, feared in all your lands as the greatest Vihulu that exists. Are you the Kyubi? Naruto stuttered in shock. Well, yes, actually. Do you know where we are? Naruto shook his head slowly as a sly smile was drawn on the Kyubi's face. Brat, it turns out that we are inside you, me. That's right, I was not killed by that human you call Yond Aim, but I was sealed inside a newborn child. This newborn baby, it turns out to be you. Naruto looked at the demon in shock, but after a few seconds, that shock turned into anger, as his eyes narrowed in fury. You are the reason the villagers hate me. Naruto snarled. Cool, they think you're me. They see you as their scapegoat for what I've caused. Kyubi watched as his expression became indecipherable as a shadow covered his face. Everything was silent while Kyubi waited for the boy's reaction. However, Naruto's reaction was what I expected. You fucking bastard. Because of you, my life is a mess. That's why I feel. Kyubi watched in amazement as the young man began to drop a long list of insults in a rather roguish manner. After a few more minutes of furious speech, Kyubi decided it was better to cut it off. Okay, I get it. Now, please calm down, unless you want to keep this rant going forever. Naruto shot a furious glance at the fox, but the fox remained impassive. Well, now, in exchange for my charge, I will allow you to use my chakra whenever I deem it necessary. Because, you see, if you die, I will die. I have no intention of dying, so I will help you as far as my well-being is concerned. Now that that's cleared up, you should wake up right now. If you have any questions, ask your sensei. He's known that forever. When Kyubi finished speaking, Naruto blinked and found himself in the forest. Naruto sat up and went to talk to his sensei about his experience. End of the flashback. All right, and now where to? He continued walking through the streets of Konoha until a tempting aroma filled his nostrils. He sniffed once, twice. Those who were staring at him saw him smelling the air and immediately wondered what he was doing. The blonde began to walk in a different direction, following the smell that filled the air. He already sighed at me there. They had no customers and were about to close at any moment. That's when he saw a blonde guy walking towards his stall. Toiki saw her and looked in the same direction. Sure enough, Naruto stopped in front of the ramen bar. The two stared in amazement at the blonde, who was sitting in front of the counter. I haven't been here in a long time. I've really missed this place, Naruto said, a smile of remembrance on his face. He remembered that, as a child, this place was his only refuge. It was the only place that did not throw it out or raise the prices exorbitantly. Toiki and Iyami were always kind and cheerful with him, and for that he was grateful. Toiki looked at him curiously, then saw his cheeks marked by the beard and knew instantly who he was. I didn't feel any resentment towards the boy. He could clearly see that he was innocent, unlike many other ignorant people. He believed in the abilities of the Yond Aim and had full confidence in the previous Okage. I saw him as a hero, the way he was supposed to be seen. This place has been very quiet since you left Naruto. I'm so glad to see you're back safe and sound, Toiki said, with an affectionate smile directed at the young blonde. Aim also dedicated a cheerful smile to him, coinciding with Toiki. Naruto asked for a bowl of ramen, and they both started making it. Naruto talked to them while they were preparing the meal, telling them where he had been and what he had been doing. He skipped the training he did with Jiraiya and gave them a very general explanation. Still, they were happy and handed him his bowl of miso ramen. "And tadakimasu," said Naruto, breaking his chopsticks and devouring the bowl of ramen in seconds. Toiki and Aya happily smiled at me when they saw that the quiet ramen stand had come back to life. Naruto asked for a second bowl, and Toiki laughed heartily. "I see your appetite hasn't diminished over the years. Thank goodness, because we were about too close due to lack of profits and customers." Naruto swallowed the ramen he had in his mouth before he spoke. "How is it possible that you don't get customers with the good ramen you make?" Toiki angry. "Don't worry. Now that you're back, I foresee a better deal." Naruto approaching and cheering, asking for a third bowl, handing Iyami the second one. Naruto started to regret eating 7 bowls of ramen when his stomach started to hurt. She shrank slightly as she walked to her old apartment. He wondered if it would even be in habitable condition. He suspended, knowing what to expect from the citizens of Konoha. He arrived at his room and opened it with the keys that the watermelon had given him, but not before noticing the insults spray-painted on the door. He ignored them as he entered, closed the door, and turned up the lights. To his horror, the furniture was overturned and thrown against the wall. Some things were broken and mangled. And there were more threats on the walls and the floor. The threats used to be the same, like demon dies, evil incarnate, or cold-blooded killer. At first, the threats depressed him, frightened him, and confused him. But now he did not attach importance to them. He wasn't going to get depressed, because he knew nothing would change. He knew the fastest way to solve his problem, so he started the manual seals, Kajiban without nojutsu. 5 shadow clones emerged, invading the small apartment. Hirai had already taught him kinjutsu because he felt it would help with his training, along with some other forbidden techniques. The clones were solid, unlike the bunsen that the regular academy taught. These Kajibunsen had their own chakra system, which allowed them to use jutsus, however. His chakra supply was quite limited. Jiraiya also told him that when they were destroyed, the memories of his short life were transferred directly to him. Jiraiya warned him that too much information would overload his mind and could make him unconscious. Naruto listened to his advice, but he did it from time to time anyway. He created a lot of shadow clones, practiced something, destroyed them when he ran out of chakra, absorbed the information, and then fell unconscious. When Hirai had already scolded him several times, he made sure not to do it too often. The 5 shadow clones got down to business. They cleaned, swept, and threw away what was broken beyond repair. The real Naruto walked towards his room, dodging one of his clones carrying a wrecked chair. He entered, while the clones were still busy in the kitchen bar room, and began to check the damage. His bed was on its side against the wall, and the spring mattress was stabbed, completely useless, in the center of the room. The clothes that were previously hanging in the closet were now reduced to ashes. It's not that I wanted her, in fact, she had grown in the last 4 years to a height of 1.48 meters. How had he grown up? Hirai simply took away his ramen-only diet, forcing him to eat well during the trip. Naruto started cleaning his room when, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed an upside-down photo frame surrounded by little ones. Fragments of glass. Naruto stopped what he was doing instantly and ran towards the object, being careful not to step on the glass. He knelt down, picked it up carefully, and turned it over to reveal the photo. The image was of Yonde, a Myokai, Naruto's greatest role model. Maybe the Yonde aim was the one who made him suffer so much, but it was he who sacrificed himself and Naruto for the good of the village. Hirai already told Naruto that he was the Yonde aim's sensei, and that Naruto looked like him in some ways. When Naruto found out about the Kyugi, he couldn't help but get angry at the great Hokage. That is, he was partly the one who caused her suffering. Finally, she decided that the Yonde aim had no other choice at that moment, and started idolizing him again. I wonder what you would do in my situation. Naruto took out the photo and put it on the desk that was still intact in his room. A clone came in and started picking up the broken glass while the real Naruto moved away. Naruto returned to his living room and noticed that the clones were finishing up and had started cleaning the room and bathroom. Naruto quietly dropped down on the couch and pulled a small scroll out of his pants pocket. He unrolled it and, without looking at its contents, bit his thumb and traced a trail of blood in the center of the text. Instantly, a brush, a small can of black paint, and a notebook appeared in his hands. He went to his door, leaving the notebook and the paint can. He opened the plastic can and poured several drops of his blood into the ink. Then he dipped the brush into its contents. With the other hand, he flipped through the notebook until he reached a specific page. He went through his personal notes and started painting a stamp on the door. The notebook contained his stamp designs and annotations on each one. 1. Studying and analyzing stamps was more of a personal hobby than something he had been taught. Jiraiya never knew about Naruto's hobby, as he used to do it secretly. He was not a master of stamps, but he could make quite complex ones. I create several original stamps based on trial and error. He had to do it over a wide area because sometimes they failed, sometimes quite harmfully. He finished the door seal, and when he finished it, he disappeared. Naruto got up and started painting the same stamp on his windows. The stamp he was writing was one he created himself, a pretty basic stamp. The seal would simply alert him when someone touched him or approached. I would alert him the same way a Kajibunzen would when he disappeared. The information was simply sent to his mind, as his blood was involved in the creation of the seal. He also blew it up on the intruder. Once he finished securing his apartment, he leaned back on the sofa. The shadow clones finished cleaning and repairing what they could and disappeared. Naruto started falling asleep on the couch because his bed no longer had a mattress. He thought about the watermelon test, but finally gave in to the long-awaited rest. The office of the Hokage the next morning. Watermelon intertwined his fingers while looking at a silver-haired jounin who was leaning against the wall lazily. "So you're the one I chose to test, just make sure you don't underestimate him." The watermelon warned me to the jounin, who only showed himself respectfully. With that, the jounin left the room with an audible jiggle. The watermelon turned my head towards the open window of his office, when a white-haired man entered through it. "I see that you have finally decided to come and visit us." The watermelon watched me as the Sennin walked calmly towards the center of the office. "I bring more information about Akatsuki, as well as about Oto and Suna," Jiraiya said sternly, arousing the Hokage's curiosity. "Suna and Oto, you mean?" "Hirai has already been promoted. I heard from my information network that Suna and Oto have been having conversations about our village. These secret meetings have been about the Chunin exams that will be held soon in our village. I'm afraid a secret alliance has been formed between the two." The Hokage stated, "I'll look into it immediately, and now what about Akatsuki? It seems to emerge from the darkness and reveal itself. His target has something to do with the tailed beasts, as it seems that the four-tailed Hinshiriki has been reported missing, after being spotted with two people dressed in red cloaks and clouds. This is not right at all. We will have to continue to monitor their actions carefully." The watermelon concluded, and there was a brief silence. "Jiraiya, what do you have to report about Naruto?" "Let's see, we stay most of the time in Inokuli, country of fire, but we travel to Walk Inokuli, country of lightning, to train, as well as Mizunokuli, country of water. Although Naruto is only 1 year old, don't underestimate him, because I think you will be quite impressed with his progress. At first, he learned slowly, but after a year, he began to improve considerably," Jiraiya explained, ending with a proud smile. "I see, what range do you think he's in?" The watermelon asked him with curiosity in his authoritative voice. "I would say," Jiraiya closed his mouth and sounded mischievously to his former sensei. "You know what? You'll have to wait and see what happens on his exam." The watermelon sighs at me. "Okay, as you wish, you can withdraw." Jiraiya went out the window, while Watermelon was checking some papers on his desk for me. Izumo, at the call of the Hokage, a Chunin entered the office. "Hello, Hokage-sama. Inform Naruto that he is at Training Camp 21 for his exam today at 2 p.m. "Hello?" The Chunin left the office, while the Watermelon kept signing papers for me. "This exam will be interesting, for sure, but why do I have the feeling that my paperwork will increase?" The Watermelon ignored the disturbing feeling and continued with his paperwork. A different reality. The test. Naruto woke up from his sleep and walked warily to his kitchen. He opened the small refrigerator only to see nothing inside. She moaned. She had forgotten to buy more food after her apartment was vandalized by an unknown intruder. Grunting, he closed the refrigerator door and walked to the bathroom to wash up. She showered, brushed her teeth, and brushed her hair a little. She came out of the bathroom with a towel and went to her bedroom. He put on his black tank top, black pants, and dark shinobi sandals. Then she threw the crimson trench coat over herself to finish. After getting dressed, he walked into the small living room and grabbed his frog wallet before walking out the door. To do the most horrible thing he could think of at that moment: shopping. He walked to the market near the city center and got to work. Before even making any purchases, he used a simple eng to change his appearance to that of any ordinary civilian. Now that her cover was done, she got to work by stopping by the grocery store first. She took some fruits and vegetables to maintain a more balanced diet. After finishing there, he toured several shops to replenish the things that had been destroyed in his apartment. To transport the numerous objects, he simply sealed them on a scroll, which allowed him to happily walk home with only a light scroll in his right hand. He dropped the eng after leaving the market, and that's when the message of an intruder came to his mind. He quickly ran to his apartment, only to find that his door was completely burned, along with part of the wall. Naruto opened the door carefully and entered. He immediately began searching for the intruder, searching his living room, bathroom, and bedroom. After concluding that the intruder had been frightened, smiling smugly, "The seal we used as security was a success." She happily opened the scroll of her purchases and started putting away the food and her belongings. Before sitting comfortably on her new sofa, he stood there thoughtfully for a moment before turning to his new and small wooden desk. She opened her notebook and started studying the stamps she had created and drew some possible stamps that they could try later. He ate an apple for a late breakfast while studying the stamps. The watermelon me was sitting at his desk, reclining quietly in his chair, smoking the pipe. He looked at the clock in his office, which marked 11 o'clock. He was about to get to work on the paperwork for the day, but he was stopped by the puzzle of someone who entered his office through the shusen. To say that the chunin in front of him was a mess would be a very understatement. The chunin's clothes were battered and burned, and smelled of gunpowder. "Izumo, what happened?" Sarutobi asked, looking at the scruffy figure in front of him. Izumo frowned as he related the story. "Okage-sama, he set me to fulfill the task he entrusted to me, to inform Naruto of his order. I came to his apartment and knocked on his door. As no one answered, I touched the knob and the thing exploded. After that, I went to inform him." The watermelon sighed deeply at me. "All right, I'll go myself. Anyway, I wanted to get out of this stuffy office." "You can leave now, Izumo. Although I suggest you visit the Konoha hospital before doing anything." The Chunina felt and took a puff, leaving the Okage in his office. Sarutobi put on his Okage hat and left his office, on his way to see Naruto. Naruto was studying his stamps when he heard a knock at the door. He calmly approached and opened. "Oh, what are you doing here, man?" Naruto asked, standing in the doorway, looking at the Okage, who was standing in front of him with a smile. "Hi Naruto, I am informing you that you will be at the training camp 21 for your exam today at 2 p.m. He was smiling at me, while Naruto was looking at him confused. "Shouldn't you send some kind of messenger for that or something?" "I'm afraid I did, Naruto, but somehow, he blew up in the process." Naruto sounds sheepishly, while rubbing the back of his neck with one hand. "I'm sorry." Watermelon smiled at me again. "Ah, all right. May I come in?" Naruto stepped away from the door and motioned for the Okage to come in. The seal that protected him from intruders would not be activated while he was in the apartment. Naruto dropped down on the couch, while Sarutobi remained standing. "Naruto, I'd like to know how you blew up my messenger," the Okage asked him. He added mentally, "even if it would save me paperwork." Naruto smiled sheepishly. "I have installed a kind of security system to prevent more intruders from entering my house." Sarutovilla felt with her head, while looking at Naruto's small apartment. Although he was curious, he knew that Naruto didn't want to continue evaluating, so he changed the subject. "How do you feel about being back in Konoha?" he asked Watermelon. Naruto paused, surprised by such an abrupt change of subject, and sighed deeply. "I'm not sure, I haven't been here long enough, but what I do know is that those hateful looks won't go away on their own. Even after all these years." Sarutobi was surprised to hear Naruto's voice so old. The boy was only 11 years old, but he looked much older. Sarutobi knew that Naruto had lost his childhood too soon. So much pain was reflected in his cerulean eyes that he had to look away. Naruto, don't give up yet. Anyway, you don't have to tell me that. Who is my opponent for my test today? Naruto interrupted, changing the subject once more. Saruto turned slightly. Ah, how curious are you now? Well, he is one of our best jounin, his name is Kakashi Attack, and he will be the one who will test you. Naruto was silent for a moment. I see, thanks. Are you leaving already? Naruto asked, with a clearly amused tone of voice. The watermelon wondered what he thought was so funny about the name of the jounin, but he said goodbye. Goodbye, Naruto, I wish you luck in your exam. Naruto watched the Okage leave and returned to his desk. He sat down on a chair and went through his notes. Great, I have 2 hours to make a new stamp. Naruto complained to no one in particular. Kushina and Asuma and Genma were waiting patiently at the 21st training camp. It was 2 p.m., and Kakashi and the one to be examined were nowhere in sight. They remained in awkward silence until Genma spoke. You know, we'll probably be waiting here for another 3 hours for Kakashi to show up. Genma turned her gaze to Asuma, who had her eyes fixed on the clouds on the horizon. No, we made sure to tell him to come here at 12 p.m., so he should arrive any minute. Just as Asuma finished speaking, Kakashi arrived in a swirl of leaves. Hello? He OP'd, greeting the examiners amicably. Kakashi looked at them and then around. After carefully observing his surroundings, he looked at the three of them again. Where is Naruto? Karena, and it was he who answered. Is that the one who is being examined? Well, actually, it hasn't arrived yet. Kakashi's eyes widened the size of plates of food. This kid broke my record for tardiness. Not knowing that Naruto was told to come 3 hours after him. After 15 minutes of waiting, a blonde-haired boy with blue eyes and cheeks with mustache marks entered the premises. He stood in front of the examiners and their examiner, smiling sheepishly. Sorry for the delay, I had something important to do, Naruto said guiltily, somewhat nervous in front of the four. Karena and dismissed him with a gesture and smiled. As long as you're not 3 hours late and making silly excuses, it gets overlooked. Kakashi felt an angry look, but he kept his nose stuck in his little orange book to try to ignore it. Naruto noticed the increase in his killer instinct and looked where he was headed. A silver-haired, spiky Hounen was the target of the women's gaze. Naruto recognized him as Kakashi, especially when he saw the idiot that covered his left eye. The lower half of his face was also hidden by a thin mask. This only aroused Naruto's curiosity to know what he was hiding. It was then that Naruto noticed the orange book in his hands, which made his left eyebrow visibly twitch. Great, I'm fighting one of the perverted fans of Erosinen's books. Before anyone could say anything, Naruto walked towards the center of the entrance. Well, let's get this over with already, shall we? The porn lover looked at the three examiners before appearing in the middle of the field, among a swirl of leaves. With the book still in front of his face, Naruto stared at him for a minute before asking, "Are you going to put that book away?" The silver-haired Jounin kept his eyes on the text as he replied, "No, I'm in a good part of the story. And I can perfectly fight with him outside." Wow, he's going to regret underestimating me, Naruto thought. The examiners saw him shrug his shoulders, and of it's your decision. That said, Kakashi suddenly heard a buzzing sound behind his back and dodged the surprise attack as quickly as possible, receiving 2 small cuts on his shoulder as a reward. After narrowly dodging the kunai, he looked at Naruto, who was standing in front of him, and saw him disappear in a cloud of smoke. Kajebansen. Kakashi thought, putting his beloved free in his pocket, after realizing that he would not be able to read it in this fight. Kakashi took out a kunai and held it in his right hand, in a defensive posture, waiting for his opponent's next move. Naruto watched Kakashi as he planned his next action, hiding among the branches of a tree. After deciding on a strategy, he got down to work. After creating several shadow clones, indicating the action plan, and watching them run through the trees, he prepared a jutsu. Naruto performed several hand seals before whispering softly, "Suten," or Arasu no Jutsu, water style. Hurricane technique. 2 small hurricanes formed, one on each hand, floating about 2.5 centimeters on both palms. He took the hurricane with his right hand and placed it on the left. He began to slide the right hurricane over the left one with a fast and fluid movement. Highly concentrated discs of water shot out of the end in quick succession. Kakashi was on high alert when he saw the water discs rapidly approaching. They were fast, and there were a lot of them. The silver-haired Jounin dodged each one gracefully, but the last ones took him by surprise. Unlike the previous ones, these were slightly faster, which made him miscalculate when to dodge. Some reached him in the legs and arms. The discs were as sharp as the cribs and common, with so many, it was a formidable attack. The last disc appeared before his eyes, and what surprised Kakashi was that it was as big as a shuriken smokes. Naruto watched as his part of the plan ended. He leaned back against the bark of the tree to take a quick breath. That last jutsu required quite a lot of puddle, since it extracted the water necessary for the movement from the air. After barely breathing for an instant, he took off again to change location. After that attack, Kakashi would surely know where he was hiding. The shadow clones from the opposite side of the original Naruto started their part of the plan, as several made hand seals. After completing the necessary seals, Chief Kagebun-sen muttered under his breath, "Katen, Kasoku no Jutsu, fire style. Licking wheel technique." Kakashi couldn't dodge the big disc of water that easily, so he jumped on it. The disc continued on its way and cut down almost half of a tree, before exploding again into many drops of water. While Kakashi was still in the air, he saw something approaching quickly from behind. Before he could react, a fire technique burned his back. Kakashi landed on his feet, preventing his skid from drifting further away with his left hand. The left side of his back was burned by the last attack. From far away from the battle, Asuma whistled, impressed by the blonde young man. "Wow! The boy is giving Kakashi a beating. I'm enjoying this, it's about time for Kakashi's karma to absure," Kulina added, and Gemma looked at the two, and then went back to the battle. "Yeah, but you know the kid got an advantage over him when Kakashi underestimated him. Now it's going to get serious." "Yes, but he took advantage of that weakness, and that gives him points in my opinion." Karena and smiled, turning her gaze to the battle. Kakashi's breathing became heavier as he cautiously observed his surroundings. That's when a lot of shurikens were thrown at him from both sides. Naruto watched from a distance as the projectiles launched by his clones approached their target. The shurikens directly hit the ninja Copia, plunging into his arms. Before Naruto could celebrate, the target was replaced by a log with the numerous shurikens still embedded. "Shit, Kawarimi. Where is he?" Naruto thought, sitting on a tree branch, searching frantically around him. That's when he felt a punch on the cheek. Naruto came out of his hiding place and headed to the clearing, where Kakashi slowly approached. "You're not bad," Kakashi commented, still feeling pain from the wounds that had been inflicted on him. "I could say the same," Naruto said, adopting a taijutsu stance that Kakashi didn't recognize. Kakashi raised his itiate to reveal the infamous Sharingan. "I think it's time for me to get serious." Naruto smiled. "It's about time." The two lunged at each other, exchanging blows. Both attacks were quick and swift, showing no signs of giving way. After a minute, they both jumped apart to take a breath. That's when Kakashi looked at the blonde in confusion. "What did you do to my Sharingan?" The examiners looked at the copy ninja and Naruto with curiosity and interest. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked innocently, still in a fighting position. He was jumping for joy inside, because the first test of his new label had been a success, but he didn't prove it. "I mean, I can't memorize your movements. Normally, the Sharingan allows me to memorize them and save them for my use. Personal, but I can't remember anything right now. I can't even see where your attacks will impact beforehand, and memorization doesn't work." "What did you do?" Kakashi asked, with an unusually serious tone of voice. Naruto kept his mask emotionless as he said, "Why should I say it? You're my opponent right now, aren't you?" Gemma looked at the other two examiners from the fight. "How did he do that?" "I don't know," Asuma replied, looking at Karena and expectantly, waiting for her opinion on the matter. "Well, whatever he's done, he doesn't tell his opponent. He is cunning in hiding what he did in battle, instead of telling you exactly what he did. If he did, his opponent would know more about the situation and come up with a plan to nullify him. Normally, one brags about his actions, stands still, and tells his opponent exactly what he did. This action leads to his inevitable downfall, Kushina said, and, with his gaze fixed on the two fighters, Asuma took her gaze away from the red-eyed beauty and turned her back to the match. Smart kid. Gemma silently nodded in agreement as she played with the zenbun on the side of her mouth. Naruto faced the jounin, but then turned his gaze back to the examiners, still with his guard up. I have a question. Should I take off the weights? Naruto shouted from the other side of the field, causing the examiners to look at him in amazement, as did Kakashi. It was Gemma who answered. Hello, we want to see you at your full potential, so that we can classify you accordingly. How come you didn't ask this before you started? Naruto smiled sheepishly. I forgot about them a little bit. The group broke a sweat at the comment, but regained their concentration soon after. Naruto bit his thumb, quickly performed some hand seals, and then touched the tiny red seals on his ankles and arms. The tiny red seals were created by Jiraiya because they were more efficient than normal weights. First, they were easy to turn on and off. The second, they didn't show his opponent how much weight he was carrying. And third, I had no weight limit. They watched him as he finished quickly and looked at him. Ingenious, Azuma commented. I like it. The other two nodded. Naruto returned to his fighting position. Let's continue. Naruto disappeared before Kakashi's eyes, too fast to follow. Naruto gave him a quick kick to the waist and watched him slide across the hard ground. Naruto quickly charged towards him, but the copy ninja disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Kajeben-sin. When? Naruto interrupted his thoughts. While looking for his opponent. Behind, up, down. At that moment, the instinct kicked in and quickly performed several hand seals. Raiten. Tsukudenryu no Jutsu, lightning style. Earth current technique, Naruto's palm began to form a current. Electricity, while it was quickly pushed towards the earth. At that instant, a silver-haired, very furious jounin emerged from the ground about a meter away from Naruto. Naruto smiled smugly when he saw that Kakashi's fingers were pricked up by the electric shock. The last move cost one more chakra, so he decided that it would be best to resort to taijutsu so that his chakra reserves would recover. Before Naruto realized it, Kakashi pounced on him and threw a kick to his head. He hit the target, throwing Naruto across the field. Naruto stood up in a daze, shaking his head. To relieve the pain that was remitting, Kakashi took advantage of his momentary recovery and attacked. Naruto stood up just as he saw Kakashi trying to kick him in the head again. He didn't allow it this time and caught the kick as he pushed it away. This action unbalanced Kakashi, which allowed Naruto kick him under the chin, throwing him up in the air. Kakashi then turned around using one hand to regain his balance. The two stared at each other, both breathing hard from exhaustion. Kakashi looked at the blonde thoughtfully. This kid could barely keep up, even with my Sharingan. I have to finish this. Naruto thought as he charged the jounin again, drawing a kunai. He added charka at his feet to speed up the pace as he moved behind Kakashi. With the kunai in his hand, Naruto tried to hit Kakashi's face, but the palm of the jounin stopped him. Kakashi countered with a kick to the waist. However, Naruto continued the attack, pushing him on the shoulder. What is this? Kakashi thought in horror, unable to move his body. As the silver-haired jounin struggled in vain, he suddenly felt the presence of cold metal against his throat. This is over, I win, Naruto said as he withdrew his kunai and walked away from the surprised jounin. Kushina and Asuma and Genma approached the two of them. Asuma walked towards Kakashi, while the other two approached Naruto. The kid's tough, isn't he? Assume. He chuckled as he watched Kakashi place his italet over his eye. That's right, he's definitely strong for his age. Kakashi watched Naruto as he chatted with the two examiners. Do you want me to take you to the hospital? That would be greatly appreciated, Kakashi said, as he fell to the ground and Asuma caught him, throwing him on his back on horseback. Asuma was about to leave when Kakashi interrupted him. Hey, wait, let me talk to Naruto first. Asuma obeyed and approached Naruto, Gemma and Kureina, and left, after telling Naruto to visit the Okage the next day to meet your results and deliver your idiate to you. Naruto tied the idiate around his neck proudly before watching the two Jounins depart. Hey Naruto. Naruto turned to look at Asuma and Kakashi, who were looking at him from the back of the smoking Jounin. Yes. How did you immobilize me for that brief moment during the fight? And how did you do that to my Sharingan? To immobilize you, I just sent electricity through your nervous system to momentarily paralyze you by pricking your shoulder. As for the Sharingan, that's my little secret. Naruto smiled at both of them. I see, Kakashi said, while thinking about what Naruto had just told him. Hey Kakashi, why did I take on the burden? Well, I used the Sharingan too much during the fight, and now I can't move my body because of chakra depletion, Kakashi said simply. Which made Naruto nod in sign of understanding. After that, Asuma took Kakashi to Konoha Hospital, while Naruto started to return home. Naruto looked at both of his dolls, where he had two red stamps. Well, at least I found out that this seal works well against the Sharingan. I was quite satisfied with the fight. Kakashi was a strong opponent. And now he was walking exhausted to his bed. He thought about the fight, going over it again and again, until he finally fell asleep. A different reality. Assignment of mission. Kushina and Asuma and Genma were now standing, lined up before the Okage. It had been an hour since the test was over. Asuma had already taken Kakashi to the hospital after the battle with Naruto. Kakashi's burn on his back could heal effortlessly with the help of the hospital's medical ninjas. It would also heal that no one would notice that it had been burned there before, without the need for an intensive search. He would also suffer from a slight depletion of the chakra, but it was nothing serious. He would make a full recovery within an hour. They met before the Okage to inform him of the results of Naruto's test to determine his rank and status as a blade shinobi. The Okage was sitting at his desk, with a stack of papers by his side. The Sandai glared at the three in front of him. So, what do they have to report? The three of them remained motionless until Genma stepped forward. Okage-sama, according to our observations, his ninjutsu is high, his taijutsu mediocre, and his skills. Since genjutsu they are unknown. His ninjutsu is very varied, according to what we have observed. He is sensible when fighting, and takes care to hide information. He can come up with a well-crafted tactical strategy in combat that allows him to overwhelm his opponent, allowing him to defeat him effectively. While this is important, something happened during the battle that caught our attention. The Okage raised an eyebrow at the latest statement. What could that be? This time it was Asuma who stepped forward, staring intently at the window. It seems that he managed to prevent the Sharingan from copying his techniques. The Sandame's eyes widened, but he immediately regained his serious expression. How did he do it? Asuma shook her head as she sighed. We're not sure, he didn't tell us, but the way he said it, he seems to know. Naruto and ascended. I'll have to confront him about that later. Now, what rank do you think he's in? Kureina and was the first to speak. Honestly, I think he has Jounin rank. The only thing is that we don't know what can also lead a mission. It is a necessary skill for all Jounin. Gemma continued. I also think Naruto has Hounin rank. The problem is that he will also not have the basic experience that other Hounin have in terms of missions, teamwork, and the like. Asuma was next, with the cigarette at the side of his mouth so he could speak. I also think Naruto has the potential to be a Hounin. The problem is that we simply don't know enough about him. The Okage closed his eyes in silence, interlacing his fingers as well. The three of them watched him intently, waiting for his answer. The Sandame sighed deeply before refocusing his gaze on the three of them. I have decided to promote Naruto to the Chunin rank, however, I will assign him a rank mission. To get to know his leadership capabilities. Those who will accompany him will be. Fixing his gaze between the red-eyed, black-haired Jounin and the smoking Jounin, the Sandame continued. Kushina and Asuma, any questions? So you're saying that this 11-year-old boy, who we don't know much about, will be my squad leader on an rank mission? Kushina asked, and with bewilderment, which the Sandai confirmed to me with a simple nod. Hello? A familiar voice is heard from the office window. The Okage recognized his presence. Kakashi, I see you've been discharged from the hospital. Cool, the silver-haired Jounin replied, he wasn't that badly injured. I know for a fact that I underestimated him. I remember warning you about that. The Sandai chuckled at me, making the Jounin's ego suffer a little. Hey, Naruto, if I remember correctly, is that the container of the Kyugi? Kakashi asked indifferently, as if he were talking about the weather. However, Kushina and Gemma and Asuma became visibly tense. Wei, does that information bother you? The Sandai asked him. Not only to Kakashi, but also to others. None of them spoke. The Sandame smiled to see that no one answered his question. Well, Naruto has a very hard life, and I would appreciate if they didn't make it more difficult. Just remember this. His smile may deceive you, but inside he suffers from an evil. It would drive anyone crazy. I wonder how he stays so sane. Now, Kakashi, the Hokage said, you and Karena, and you will be assigned a rank mission, with Naruto as your squad leader. But Hokage-sama, Kakashi interjected. Let me finish, Attack-san, said the Hokage, as if and will wait for an interruption. This mission will evaluate Naruto's rank in more detail. I will inform you, Kushina and Asuma and Naruto in the quest room about your task tomorrow. You may withdraw, only Kakashi remains. I need to talk to you guys. Genma, Asuma and Kushina, and left. In a cloud of smoke, through the Shunsin. Kakashi remained in his place, while the Hokage watched him with the authority that must be shown by one who holds the title of Hokage. Kakashi, according to the reports of the fight, I understand that Naruto has the ability to disable a part of the Sharingan eye? The Sandame said with faith, without taking his eyes off the present Hounen. Yes, that's true. Turned off the part of the Sharingan that allows me to copy the techniques, and I could have sworn something else seemed wrong. Is it still working properly? The Hokage asked him. Kakashi nodded silently, while crossing his arms. I made sure it was still working before I left the hospital. I used it to memorize my medical report on the edge of the bed. And, indeed, it works perfectly now, the Sharingan user explained. The watermelon kept me silent, while I reflected on the information I had just finished. To receive. After turning the information over, he focused on Kakashi again. I need you to inform Naruto that I need him in my office within an hour. Kakashi nodded, and was about to leave through the window when the Sandai spoke to me again. Wait a minute. Kakashi stopped halfway. Through the window. Sarutobi chuckled to himself as he spoke. I advise you not to enter Naruto's apartment if he is not there. We had a very unfortunate incident with my last courier when he tried to open the door. Kakashi arched an eyebrow with interest, but then nodded and left. Sarutobi leaned back in his chair and put his infamous pipe in his mouth. He was relaxing in his chair, thinking about today's events. When a woman entered with her face hidden behind a stack of papers that looked how terrible. The Hokage shuddered when the woman dropped the huge pile of papers on his desk, ordering him to finish. Then, he left the office and found a very depressed-looking Hokage, who at that time was only thinking about his retirement. Naruto had just woken up from his short nap and walked into the living room. He took the little scroll out of his pocket and bit his thumb at it. Time. When he opened it, the blood was extracted from his thumb, staining the words of the scroll from top to bottom. A small cloud of smoke was created, and with it Naruto's notebook, brush and paint. He left the brush and the paint on his desk because he didn't need them at that moment. He took a pencil from his desk and sat down on the sofa. She looked through many pages of stamps and their details until she came to the one she was wearing on her wrists. It showed a sketch of the stamp, along with labels and descriptions. He noted that his first test was a success. She made sure that the ones on her dolls exactly matched the sketch on her notes before cleaning the stamps. Then he started sketching out ideas for new stamps. It was during his stamp study that he was interrupted by a few knocks on the door. Naruto reluctantly sat up, walked over and opened up. In front of him was no one less than Attack Kakashi. Naruto looked at him warily, showing that he didn't want to be disturbed. What do you want? Kakashi ignored his signs of rudeness and continued to speak with his usual accent. Okage-sama requests that I come to his office. Again? Naruto asked in annoyance. It was not very funny for him to receive so many orders, with little or no rest between them. Hello? If you'll excuse me, I have some important books to read. That said, the porn lover disappeared in a cloud of smoke. What is this world becoming? Naruto thought as he closed the door, locked, and started walking towards the office of the Hokage. After walking for a while through the streets, he began to feel uncomfortable because of the stairs and went to the rooftops. On the rooftops, he decided to go at a faster pace and became a blurred image for civilians. He arrived at the Hokage tower in question of minutes and passed by the Chunin guards at the base of the building. He climbed the wooden steps and walked down a corridor until finally he saw a door guarded by 2 Chunin. The one on the left of the door was apparently the supposed messenger who had accidentally flown, for he directed him an angry look. The Chunin next to him had spiky hair and a bandage strip in the middle of his face. His facial expression showed an obvious amusement towards him and his companion. The spiky-haired Chunin on the right was the one who spoke to the blonde ninja. "You are Uzumaki Naruto." Naruto smiled sheepishly as he saw the left Chunin's gaze intensify. "That's me." "One moment, please, the Hokage is in a brief meeting with an important figure and should end at any moment." "I can wait." Naruto turned his attention to the Chunin on the left side of the door. Sorry. Because of the explosion, it was just a matter of personal safety. No hard feelings, right?" The Chunin looked at him sternly, before breaking into a warm smile. "No hard feelings. I know it was an accident, although I assure you that I will not put your safety to the test in the near future." Heh, Naruto smiled sheepishly. "Yes, I'm sorry anyway. May I know the name I have the pleasure of talking with?" "Well said," the Chunin commented impressively. "I'm trying." Naruto smiled. "My name is Izumo, and my partner next to me is Kateksu," Izumo said, while pointing. He waved at his partner when he was introduced. Naruto gave them a friendly smile when the door opened between them, revealing a tall man. His eyes were the pale, pupil-less eyes of a Hyuga. Naruto recognized him from his childhood as Hyuga Ace. From the way he frowned in displeasure, it was safe to say that he still had a stick stuck up his ass, and a very fat one at that. The group remained silent until Ace disappeared from sight. "Well," Kateksu said, "I guess you can see the Hokage by now." "Thank you, it was nice to meet you both," Naruto said as he walked between them and entered the office of the Hokage. Naruto took a quick look around the office, but it was strange to say that he didn't see the Sandaime. "Hey man!" he called Naruto quite loudly. "Over here," was the reply Naruto received from a voice hidden behind the piles of papers piled on the desk of the Hokage. Naruto casually walked towards him. I didn't see you there for a moment," he said, a little embarrassed. The Hokage sighed. "Well, the paperwork is flooding me today. Sometimes it can be that cruel. Sometimes it's not always cruel." Right. "Well, let's get to the point, because it seems that I don't have much time to talk with all this pending paperwork." "I was wondering why you were bothering me so soon," Naruto said warily. "I was hungry. I didn't have time for lunch, and it was almost dinner time." "Yeah, well, I was hoping you could explain how you managed to disable part of Kakashi's Sharingan during the match. It is important that you answer my question honestly."